know what time it is? It's time for KP Video News. That's right. KP Video News, y'all. KP Video News. Time for the news. Time for the news, y'all. KP Video News, y'all.
That's right. It's time for KP's Video News. I'm working on another theme song here. Might add a little piano or something to that. We'll see. But anyway, I have to give you this story here, and it's a this is a news update about icon, the founding father of rock and roll, Little Richard, has passed away, and he's dead at 87 years old. And singer, pianist behind the songs Tutti Frutti, Good Golly Miss Molly, Long Tall Sally set the template that a generation of musicians would follow. Little Richard, the founding father of rock and roll, whose fervent shrieks, flamboyant garb, and joyful gender-bending persona embodied the spirit of the sound of the new art form, died, and he was 87 years old. The musician's son, Danny Jones, Penniman, confirmed that pioneer's death to Rolling Stone. The cause of death was bone cancer. The musician's lawyer, Bill Sobey, said, starting with Tutti Frutti in 1956, Little Richard cut a series of unstoppable hits, Long Tall Sally, Rip It Up. The same year, Lucille in 1957, Good Golly Miss Molly in 1958. Driven by his simple, pumping piano and gospel-influenced vocal exclamations and sexually charged, often gibberish lyrics, I heard Little Richard and Jerry Lee Lewis, and that was it, said Elton John. I didn't ever want to do anything else. I'm more of a Little Richard stylist than a Jerry Lee Lewis, I think. I think Jerry Lee is an intricate piano player, and so anyway, Jerry Lee Lewis and Little Richard used to go back and forth there. Although he never hit the top 10 again after 1958, Little Richard's influence was massive. The Beatles recorded several of his songs, including Long Tall Sally and Paul McCartney singing on those tracks, and the Beatles' own I'm Down paid tribute to Little Richard's shrieking throat style. His songs became part of rock and roll canon, covered over the decades by everyone from the Everly Brothers, the Kinks, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Elvis Costello and the Scorpions. Elvis popularized rock and roll, said somebody named Steve Van Zandt tweeted. Chuck Berry was the storyteller. Little Richard was the architect of rock and roll. So Little Richard stage persona, his pompadours, androgynous makeup, and glass bead shirts also set a standard for rock and roll showmanship. Prince, to cite one obvious example, owed a sizable debt to the musician. Prince is the Little Richard of his generation, Richard told Joan Rivers in 1989, before looking at the camera and addressing Prince. I was wearing purple before you was wearing it. Born Richard Wayne Penniman on December 5th, 1932 in Macon, Georgia. He was one of 12 children and grew up around uncles who were preachers. I was born in the slums. My daddy sold whiskey, bootleg whiskey. Although he sang in the nearby church, his father, Bud, wasn't supportive of his son's music and accused him of being gay, resulting in Penniman leaving home at age 13 and moving in with a white family in Macon. But music stayed with him. One of his boyhood friends was Otis Redding, and Penniman heard R&B, blues, and country while working at a concession stand at a Macon City auditorium. After performing at the TikTok Club in Macon and winning a local talent show, Penniman landed his first record deal with RCA in 1951. He became a Little Richard when he was about 15 years old, when R&B and blues world were filled with acts like Little Esther and Little Milton. He had also grown tired with people mispronouncing his last name as Pennyman. He learned his distinctive piano style from Escarita, a South Carolina singer and pianist who also wore his hair in a high black pompadour. For the next 5 years, Little Richard's career advanced only fitfully from fairly tame conventional singles he cut for RCA and other labels didn't chart. When I first came along, I never heard any rock and roll, he told Rolling Stone. When I started singing rock and roll, I sang it a long time before I presented it to the public because I was afraid they wouldn't like it. I never heard nobody do it and I was scared. By 1956, he was washing dishes at a Greyhound bus station in Macon, a job he had first taken a few years earlier after his father was murdered and Little Richard had to support his family. By then, only one track he'd cut, Little Richard's Boogie, hinted at the musical tornado to come. I put that little thing in it, he told Rolling Stone, of the way he tweaked his gospel roots. I always did have that thing, but I didn't know what to do with it, with the thing I had. During this low point, he sent a tape with the rough version of a Baldy Novelty song called Tutti Frutti to Specialty Records in Chicago. He came up with the song's famed chorus, wop babaloo bop wop boom boom, wow, bored washing dishes. He also co-wrote Long Tall Sally while working that same job. By coincidence, label owner and producer Art Root was in search of a lead singer for some tracks he wanted to cut in New Orleans, and Penniman's howling delivery fit the bill. In September 1955, the musician cut a lyrically cleaned up version of Tutti Frutti, which became his first hit, peaking at 17 on the pop chart. Tutti Frutti really started the races being together, he told Rolling Stone in 1990. From the get-go, my music was accepted by whites. His follow-up, Long Tall Sally, hit number 6, becoming the highest placing hit of his career. Just over a year, the musician released one relentless and arresting smash after another. From Long Tall Sally to Slippin' and Slidin', Little Richard's hits, a glorious mix of boogie, gospel, and jump blues produced by Robert Bumps Blackwell, sounded like he never stood still. With his trademark pompadour and makeup, he was instantly on the level of Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, and other early rock icons, complete with rabid fans and mob concerts. That's what the kids in America were excited about, he told Rolling Stone. They don't want falsehood, they want the truth. It was with the heavy heart that I asked for prayers for the family of a longtime friend and fellow rocker, Little Richard. He would live on always in our hearts, and his amazing talent and his friendship, he was one of a kind, and he would be missed dearly. As with Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, and other contemporaries, Little Richard also was cast up in early rock and roll movies like Don't Knock the Rock in 1956, The Girl Can't Help It in 1957, and in a sign of how segregated the music business and radio were at the time, though Pat Boone's Milquest covers of Tutti Frutti and Long Tall Sally, both released in 1956, charted as well, if not higher, than Little Richard's own original versions. Penniman later told the Rolling Stone that he made sure to sing Long Tall Sally faster than Tutti Frutti, so Boone couldn't copy him as much. But then his hit stopped by his own choice. After what he interpreted as signs, a plane engine that seemed to be on fire, and a dream about the end of the world and his own damnation, Penniman gave up music in 1957 and began attending the Alabama Bible School and Oakwood College, where he eventually became an ordained minister. When he finally cut another album in 1959, the result was a gospel set called God is Real. His gospel music career floundered, and Little Richard returned to secular rock in 1964. Although none of the albums or singles he cut over the next decade for a variety of labels sold well, he was welcomed back by a new generation of rockers like the Rolling Stones and Bob Dylan, the Beatles. And when Little Richard played the Star Club in Hamburg, Germany in the early 60s, the opening act was none other than the Beatles. We used to stand backstage at Hamburg Star Club and watch Little Richard play, John Lennon said later. He used to read from the Bible backstage, and just to hear him talk, we'd sit around and listen. I still love him. He's one of the greatest. By 1970s, Little Richard was making a respectable living on the rock oldie circuit, immortalized in the searing, sweaty performance of the 1973 documentary Let the Good Times Roll. During this time, he became addicted to marijuana and cocaine, while at the same time, while returning to his gospel roots. Little Richard also dismantled sexual stereotypes in rock and roll, even if he confused many of his fans along the way. During his teen years and into his early rock stardom, his stereotypical flamboyant personality made some speculate about his sexuality. But that flamboyance didn't derail his career. In 1984 biography, The Life and Times of Little Richard, he denounced homosexuality as contagious. It's not something you were born with. And so, you know, later in life, he describes himself as omnisexual, attracted to both men and women. But during an interview with the Christian Tide 3 Angels broadcasting group, he suddenly denounced gay and trans lifestyles. And yet none of that seemed to damage his mystique or legend. In the 1980s, he appeared in movies like Down and Out in Beverly Hills and TV shows like Full House, Miami Vice, Martin, and other shows. 10 original inductees into, he was one of the 10 original inductees into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1993, and he was handed a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Grammys. His last known recording was in 2010 when he cut a song and for a tribute album gospel singer Dottie Rambo. In the years before his death, Little Richard, who was by then based in Nashville, still performed periodically. On stage, though, the physicality of old was gone. Thanks to the hip replacement surgery in 2009, he could only perform sitting down at his piano, but rock and roll spirit never left him. I'm sorry I can't do it like it's supposed to be done, he told the audience in 2012. After the audience screamed back in encouragement, he said, with the Little Richard squeal, "You're going to make me scream like a little white girl." All right. So, rest in peace, Little Richard. Passed away this past Saturday. The story is just now coming out at 87 years old. Story just came out today. And that's a rock and roll, just a music, say a total music icon. And even while he was living, he was definitely a living legend, and his music will continue to live on. And that's, like I said, he was the creator, the father of rock and roll. And it can't nobody else take that. No, hell no, it was not Elvis, it was Little Richard.
That's right, it's time for KP Video News, y'all. KP